So the third afterthought is about the theory of Adalat Sahabi. Epistemologically, when we talk about Adalat Sahabi, means we're justifying the probabilistic, or we are accepting the probabilistic elements in Mustalah 1.0. Because Mustalah 1.0, the Marasil al-Sahabi, Marasil means when a Sahabi sends a particular hadith to the Prophet without mentioning if there's any intermediary. Because if you don't know of an intermediary, then at least in other layers besides the Sahabi, it becomes a weak hadith. People have to realize what this means epistemologically, and what it means emotionally, and what it means politically, because those are three different meanings. Epistemologically, you are basically making an assumption. You are making a probabilistic assumption. You're allowed to do that, since you do acknowledge that your final product is probabilistic. Why? Because it's too difficult to investigate. So you just make an assumption and you go on. You assume that category, the first layer, is beyond questioning, and you go on. And that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine, as long as you recognize that your final product is probabilistic. The problem becomes is when people get emotional about this and start quoting the Quran. That the Quran said this about the Sahaba, the Quran said that about Sahaba. While the Quran is not talking about the Sahaba in the definition by Mustalah 1.0. The Mustalah 1.0 is talking about an entire generation of every Muslim that was alive at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, who saw him even for 1 hour. So that is not the same that the Quran. What is the Quran talking about the Sahaba? The Quran is talking about the Sahaba. Those who are in proximity to the Prophet, who has paid a heavy price in support of the religion and to establish Islam. He is talking about those Sahaba who are deep believers and have high status, and he doesn't name them. And at the same time, he says there is munafiqeen. Even when sometimes the Quran talks about the Sahaba, he talks about different versions of the Sahaba. He talks about those who are really, really good, and those who are intermediate, and those who are not. So the issue is, when people try to defend this theory, it's very important to recognize: are you talking in the realm of epistemology? Because if you're talking in the realm of epistemology, this is an assumption. If you're talking in the realm of emotion, and what the Quran is talking about, the Quran is talking about something else. The Quran is not talking about the Sahaba as we define them epistemologically in Mustalah 1.0. It's talking about significantly smaller version of what we consider as Sahaba. And then the issue, the third element of that is politically. Politically is because the politics of Shia revolves around the family, revolves around the lineage, revolves around like the chosen few. For them to justify that theory, they had competition. I mean, to them, their theory revolves around a particular lineage that stems from the Prophet. So where's the competition? The competition is everybody else that is alive. That's why they had to take a very adversarial position to the rest of the Sahaba, because in their theory, Ali was supposed to be the ruler, because their theory, again, it's about lineage. If Ali was supposed to be the ruler, but reality is different. Reality, Abu Bakr was a ruler, then Umar, then Uthman, and then Muawiyah after the conflict. So because all of these are contradictions to their theory, then they become very adversarial, and they start, discrediting Sahaba and even cursing them, and all of that stuff. And obviously, on the other end, they're going to have an even reaction to that negative reaction, and going to have an even more inflamed reaction. So this issue of Adalat Sahaba, this concept of Adalat Sahaba, exists in three realms that when people talk about them, they sort of mix them without having clear which realm are we talking about. There's the epistemologic realm, which is an assumption for a probabilistic product, which is okay as long as you understand, you're conscientious about it that it's an assumption. Then there's the emotional realm. People get emotional and they start quoting the Quran about it. Well, the Quran is not talking about the Sahaba that the epistemologic realm is talking about. And then there is the political realm where the Shia, because of the contradiction between their political theory and reality, and they want to discredit all the other Sahaba basically, and then the reaction by the Sunnah against that negative reaction.
And just for clear, just to make things abundantly clear, when you talk about the epistemological, adel of Sahaba, you're talking about the fact that under the epistemology of hadith, all of the people who have met the Prophet are considered Sahaba. So you're talking about tens of thousands of people. And then when you talk about the Quran, that talks about Sahaba, you're talking about like a few cases of which
Quran is basically talking about al-Muhajirin wal-Ansar.
Yeah.
He's not talking about Sahaba. He's talking about Muhajirin wal-Ansar.
Yeah.
And even among those, you may even make the case that it's an even smaller version of the Muhajirin wal-Ansar.
Right. And then of course the Shia,
Yep.
with that.
Then the last afterthought I had is actually goes, and I don't think it's a realm that anybody has ever investigated. Because maybe they think it's too sacred, but the psychology of the Prophet. I mean, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are some verses in the Quran that are, if you were in his position, that are terrifying. You really, really, really have to deliver the message as it is. And if you don't deliver the message as it is, theoretically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, said the Prophet is he forgave him, everything that happened and everything that is to come. And he said, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You have the best of values and the best of morals and the best of conduct. But he also said verses, and I will go over it with you, that are worth stopping, not because of what they mean, because they never materialized. They never materialized. But because how would that impact the psychology of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in terms of how to deliver the message exactly as it is? Because that may give you a light or an idea or insight why he said, don't write down anything else. If you, when we go over those verses, Yep. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ تَقَوَّلَ عَلَيْنَا بَعْضَ الْأَقَاوِيلِ. If he makes, he's talking about his Prophet, if he makes any statement about, in our name, basically the context means if he makes any statements in our name that we didn't give it, لَأَخَذْنَا مِنْهُ بِالْيَمِينِ. We will grab him by the right. Basically, it's a linguistic term, meaning you will be basically
reprimanded.
Big time. I mean, almost like arrested, ثُمَّ لَقَطَعْنَا مِنْهُ الْوَتِينَ. And then we will sever. Al-watin is basically the way it is translated is the major artery. It's the abhar or the aorta. Basically, we will if he says anything in our name that we didn't say, he's done. Basically, that's what the verse is saying. There's another verse says in Surah Taha. He says, he's talking about his relationship with the Quraysh and how they're interacting with him and how they. Can you open the Mus'haf so I can remember the exact verse?
Why don't you pause it?
Okay.
I haven't downloaded